This goes back to when I was about 18, shortly after I had just learned to drive properly. I had recently bought a second-hand MK3 Cortina. It wasn't anything special at all, cheap, a bit rusty, not exactly comfortable, but mechanically it ran fine, which was all I really cared about at the time. Around that same period, I had saved up a bit of money from summer work and decided I wanted to do something different with it. Instead of just staying local, I planned a solo road trip up the country. I started in Norfolk and set myself a loose goal of making it all the way up to Aberdeen, where my uncle lived. I didn't really plan it properly. I just thought I'd drive, stop wherever I felt like, meet people along the way, and sleep in the car when I needed to. And that's exactly what I did. For a few days, it actually felt amazing. I stopped in random towns, went into small pubs, talked to locals, and sometimes just stayed places longer than I planned, because I didn't have anywhere I needed to be. By the time I reached the Highlands, though, things had changed a bit. Me and the car were both pretty rough by that point. I hadn't showered properly in a while. The car smelled like a mix of sweat, petrol, and sleeping bag, and I was starting to feel the distance I had covered. Still, I kept going. It was one night somewhere in the Highlands when this happened. I was driving down a narrow, empty B road. It was one of those long stretches where there's nothing around except trees, hills, and darkness. No street lights, no traffic, just the sound of the engine and tires on the road. That's when I saw her. On the left side of the road, there was a hitchhiker standing there. What immediately stood out wasn't just that she was hitchhiking, but how she looked. She was blonde, and fairly noticeable even from a distance, wearing hot pants and a t-shirt. It felt really out of place for early October in Scotland. Even at the time, I remember thinking it didn't match the weather at all. My first instinct was actually that I should stop. Back then, I probably would have stopped for almost anyone in that situation, but as I got closer, something changed in my head. I became very aware of myself, the car, and how I must have looked and smelled. I remember glancing at the passenger seat, seeing all my stuff thrown around, and suddenly feeling embarrassed at the idea of someone getting in. It sounds silly now, but in that moment, I just didn't stop. As I slowed down slightly to pass her, the road was quite narrow. She was close enough that if she wanted to, she could have stepped into the road, and for a second, it looked like she almost did. There was a small movement forward like she might step out into the lane, but I kept going. I didn't make eye contact. I just drove past. Almost immediately after passing her, I remember that feeling of regret kicking in. I kept thinking I should have stopped, or at least pulled over ahead and waited for her to walk up. So I kept driving, probably around 40 miles per hour, scanning ahead for somewhere to safely stop. The road was completely empty. No cars behind me, no oncoming traffic, just long, dark stretches of road. I kept thinking about it more and more as I drove. It wasn't sitting right with me that I just passed her like that. About 10 minutes passed, maybe a bit more. I'd been driving, watching the road, still thinking about whether I should go back or stop further ahead. Then I came around a gentle bend, and I saw her again. At first, I honestly thought I was mistaken. My brain tried to rationalize it immediately. Maybe there was more than one hitchhiker. Maybe I was just tired and misjudging distance. But as I got closer, I slowed down. It looked like the same girl. Same blonde hair. Same clothing, same stance. Standing on the side of the road with her thumb out, just like before. Everything about it felt identical. As I passed her again, she reacted in a very similar way, shifting slightly forward like she might step into the road again. And just like before, I kept driving. But this time, I was genuinely confused, because there was no logical way she could have gotten ahead of me on that road. I hadn't seen any side roads, intersections, or places she could have gone quickly enough to appear again like that. I checked my mirrors. There was nothing behind me either, just empty road. I kept driving for a while after that, trying to convince myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe I misjudged distance. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I was more tired than I realized. But none of it really made sense when I replayed it in my head. And even now, I still can't fully explain how I saw the same hitchhiker twice in almost the exact same way, on a road where it didn't feel like that should have been possible. This happened on Christmas Eve a few years ago. I was about 18 at the time, and I was in the car with my mom and my younger sister. We had stayed late at a family gathering, and by the time we actually left, it was already around 2 in the morning. The drive home wasn't long, maybe around 20 minutes, but it was one of those routes that feels a lot longer at night, especially because most of it was rural. No real street lights, just dark stretches of road cutting through trees, and the occasional reflection off the river that ran parallel to part of the highway. I remember sitting in the front seat, kind of half awake, just staring out the window and waiting to get home. My sister was asleep in the back seat, completely knocked out. The car was quiet in that way it gets when everyone is tired and nobody really feels like talking anymore. My mom was driving like she always did, slow, cautious, tapping the brakes more than necessary. It used to annoy me, but that night I didn't really care. I was too tired to argue or even think about it. We were on this long, winding stretch of road where the river runs on one side and thick woods line the other. It's the kind of road where you don't see much besides what your headlights pick up. There's a section where a small bridge branches off to the left before our main turnoff, and that part always felt a little more isolated than the rest. I remember looking ahead, kind of zoning out, just thinking about getting home, maybe going straight to bed. Everything felt normal. Almost too normal. Then, just before a bend in the road, something made my mom suddenly react. She slammed on the brakes. Hard. The car jerked forward slightly before coming to a stop, and I immediately looked up, trying to understand what had just happened. Right in front of us, maybe only a short distance ahead, there was a car sitting completely across our lane. Not parked on the side, not angled, just straight across the road, blocking it entirely. For a second, I didn't even process what I was seeing. My brain kind of refused to accept it at first, like it didn't belong there. It felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately explain. Inside the car were 2 men. They were just sitting there, not moving, not waving, not trying to turn around, just facing toward us. I remember this very strange feeling in my stomach, like something about the situation was off in a way I couldn't articulate yet. My mom didn't hesitate. I had never seen her react that fast before. She swore, threw the car into reverse, and immediately started backing up. The whole thing shifted from confusion to panic in seconds. I turned around slightly in my seat, watching as she reversed quickly back down the road. The tires were moving faster than I expected for a situation like that, like she already knew exactly what she was doing. As we backed up toward that small bridge turnoff, I looked forward again and noticed something else that made everything feel worse. At the far end of that road, there was another vehicle. It looked like it was positioned in a way that effectively blocked that exit too. I don't remember seeing movement or headlights or anything like that, just a car sitting there in a way that didn't feel accidental. At that point, my mom said something under her breath about them not being up to anything good. Her voice wasn't panicked, but it was serious, controlled, like she was trying not to escalate the situation while already understanding what kind of situation it might be. She had lived in Mexico City years ago, and she had always said she learned to recognize certain types of situations quickly. I don't know exactly what she saw in that moment, but her reaction made it feel a lot more real. She didn't stop. She didn't slow down. She quickly turned the car around again and accelerated away from the area. Nobody said much after that. The car was just quiet again, but in a completely different way than before. Not peaceful, just tense. We didn't go home after that. We went straight to my aunt's house instead because we didn't have cell phones at the time to call anyone while driving. From there, we contacted the police. They did eventually come out, but nothing was ever found or explained. No vehicles, no people, nothing. We ended up getting a police escort home later that night just to be safe. I never drove that road again after that. I always took a longer route from then on, even though it added time. And even now, I still think about how quickly that situation escalated from a normal drive home into something that felt completely wrong. There's this road in northern New Jersey that people always used to talk about like it was something creepy or cursed. But in reality, it wasn't anything supernatural or dramatic. It was just a long, isolated stretch of road going through thick woods, about 10 miles or so, with no streetlights, barely any cell service, and almost no traffic at night. Still, over the years, it built up a reputation. People would talk about strange things happening there. Ghost stories, cult activity, animal sacrifices, satanic rituals, trucks flashing their lights at you for no reason. The usual kind of stories you hear about remote roads like that. My best friend and I used to drive it pretty often, but not because we believed any of that. We just liked it because it was quiet. It became a sort of routine for us. We'd drive in one end, go all the way through until the road opened back up where houses and normal streets started again, turn around, and drive back the same way. Nothing ever happened on it. Not once. It was just a peaceful night drive through the woods, until one night around 1 a.m. We couldn't sleep, so we decided to take the drive again like we usually did. It was close enough that it didn't feel like a big trip, just something to do to clear our heads. The drive-in was normal at first. Same road, same darkness, same quiet atmosphere. But about halfway through the stretch, something caught our attention. There were markings on the road. At first, we didn't even fully understand what we were looking at. It looked like writing or symbols painted directly onto the asphalt. We both slowed down without even talking about it. It was one of those moments where you just react instinctively. As we got closer, we could see more detail. It wasn't random graffiti on the side of the road. It was directly on the surface of the road itself. Symbols and shapes spread across the lane in a way that looked deliberate. Some of it looked like things we recognized from movies or online, including pentagram-like shapes, but a lot of it didn't make sense at all. We both just kept saying things like, "What is that?" or "What the hell are we looking at?" It was unsettling, but we didn't stop right away. We kept driving forward slowly, trying to make sense of it as we passed over and through it. Eventually, we reached the end of the road, where it opens back up into a more normal residential area. We turned around there like we always did. On the way back, the conversation was still focused on what we had just seen. At that point, we were trying to convince ourselves it was probably just some prank. Maybe people messing around, trying to scare drivers, or just doing something edgy in a remote place where no one would notice. By the time we got back to the same section, we decided to stop. We pulled over and got out of the car. We walked closer to the markings to actually look at them properly. Up close, it was even stranger. It wasn't chalk or dirt or anything temporary. It looked like it had been painted directly onto the road surface. That detail made it feel a lot more intentional, like someone had taken time to do it properly. We took a few pictures of it. I wish I still had them now, but that was years ago, and they're long gone. At the time, we had no real idea what most of the symbols meant. We only really recognized a few, like the pentagram shapes. But the rest was unfamiliar, and honestly a bit uncomfortable to look at standing there in the middle of the night. Still, we eventually convinced ourselves it was probably just some group messing around or trying to be creepy. So after a few minutes, we got back in the car and left. But the next night, we ended up telling someone about it. And naturally, that turned into us going back again with them so we could show it. We drove the exact same route, expecting to see it again in the same place. But when we got there was nothing. No symbols, no paint, no markings at all on the road. We slowed down, even circled back to check properly, but it was completely gone. Not faded, not partially washed out, just gone entirely, like it had never been there in the first place. And that was what made it hard to explain, because we both clearly remembered seeing it. We both stopped, we both took pictures. But the next night, there was no trace of it at all. This happened years ago while I was driving alone at night through a long stretch of wooded road that I had taken plenty of times before. It wasn't anything unusual for me at the time, just one of those routes you get used to. During the day, it's actually a really nice drive. Tall trees on both sides, thick branches forming kind of a tunnel over the road in places, especially where it gets denser. But at night, it's a completely different experience. There aren't many lights out there. Once you're in it, you're kind of committed to it for a while. That night, I remember I had NPR playing quietly through the speakers. Nothing loud, just background noise so I wasn't driving in complete silence. The car itself was running fine. Everything felt normal. I wasn't tired enough to feel unsafe, but I was in that kind of late-night driving state where your thoughts start to drift a little, just focusing on the road, letting time pass. Then it happened. There was no warning at all. One moment everything was normal, and the next, everything inside the SUV just shut off. Completely. The headlights, the dashboard lights, the interior lights, the radio, everything. At first, my brain didn't even register it correctly. It was like my eyes were still expecting to see light, so I almost thought I was just imagining it. But then I realized there was nothing, not dim light, not flickering, just complete darkness. It was so dark that I couldn't see anything inside the car at all. I actually lifted my hand in front of my face just to test it. I remember pressing it close enough that I knew exactly where it was, but visually there was nothing. No outline, no shadow, nothing at all. It was like the entire interior of the car had been erased from sight. Outside the windows wasn't any better. There were no reflections, no glow from the dashboard, nothing bouncing off the road. Just darkness stretching in every direction. The only thing that still made sense was that I was moving. I could feel the car still rolling forward on the road. For a moment, I just remember this strange pause in my mind, like I was trying to accept that everything had just stopped working at once. No gradual failure, no warning signs, just instant blackout. The radio, which had been playing NPR, was also completely silent. Not even static, just nothing. That silence made it feel even worse somehow. And then I became aware of my dogs in the back. They were in the cargo area as usual, and at first I thought maybe they were just shifting around because I had slowed down slightly. But then I heard low growling, not aggressive barking, but that low, uneasy sound dogs make when something feels wrong. That immediately made my stomach tighten, because they weren't reacting like that for no reason. I didn't stop the car. I don't even think I could have processed stopping in that moment. I just kept going straight, hands on the wheel, trying to stay aligned with what I remembered of the road. It felt like I was driving based on memory instead of sight. I remember letting out a nervous laugh at one point, almost in disbelief, just saying something like, "This is really weird," mostly to break the tension and calm myself and the dogs down. It didn't really help much. At some point, I reached toward the dashboard completely by feel. I knew where the headlight switch was supposed to be, so I just started feeling around for it. When I finally found it, I paused. It was in the off position. That didn't make sense to me at all. It wasn't a switch that could be bumped accidentally. It required a deliberate turn. I remember just holding it for a second, trying to process how that could have happened without me noticing. Then I turned it back on. And almost instantly, everything came back. The headlights lit up the road ahead. The dashboard returned. The interior lights came back on. The radio resumed playing NPR like nothing had happened at all. There was no delay, no gradual recovery, just instant normality again. I immediately checked my surroundings, trying to make sense of whether I had drifted or missed something. But everything looked exactly as it should. Same road, same stretch of trees, same direction. Nothing seemed out of place. The dogs settled almost immediately after the lights came back on, which made the whole thing feel even more unsettling in hindsight, like they had been reacting to something I couldn't perceive. I kept driving after that, but the rest of the trip felt completely different. Even though everything was normal again, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just gone very wrong for those few moments, and I've never been able to explain it properly since. This is something I've only told a few people in detail, mainly because I still don't fully understand it myself. It happened a few months ago, around 2 in the morning. My wife and daughter were in the car with me. My daughter was asleep in the back seat, completely knocked out, and my wife was awake in the passenger seat, just quietly on her phone every now and then. We were driving on a rural 4-lane road, 2 lanes in each direction. It was one of those long open stretches where you can see far ahead, but at that time of night there's barely any traffic. Everything just feels empty and quiet. I was just driving normally, steady speed, nothing unusual. My mind wasn't really on anything in particular, just the road, trying to get us home. Everything felt completely normal, until I saw him. Far ahead, in the right lane, there was a figure standing in the road. At first I just registered it as a person, but as I got closer, I could see more detail. It looked like a man wearing a high-visibility safety vest, the kind road workers or maintenance crews wear. That was the first thing that made me lift my foot slightly off the accelerator, because it didn't make sense. Not at that time of night, on that road, with no other signs of anything happening. My first thought was maybe there was a breakdown or road work ahead that I couldn't see yet. But there were no flashing lights, no cones, no vehicles pulled over. Nothing. Just him, standing in the middle of the right lane, facing toward us. As I got closer, I slowed down more. Probably around 40 miles, maybe less. My attention locked onto him completely because he wasn't moving out of the way. He just stood there. My wife noticed I had slowed down and asked what was going on, but I didn't answer right away. I was too focused on figuring out what I was actually seeing. The closer I got, the clearer he became. Black male, reflective vest catching the headlights, standing upright in the lane, facing directly toward our car. And what really stood out was the way it felt like he was looking straight at me. Not just in our direction, directly at the driver. That's when something in my stomach just sank. I couldn't explain it, but the situation felt wrong. Then, as I was almost right on top of him, everything happened in a split second. He moved, but not like stepping aside or trying to avoid the car. He lunged, a sudden committed movement straight into the path of my vehicle. It happened so fast my brain barely had time to register it. I remember screaming and slamming on the brakes at the exact same moment. Everything turned into sound and motion, tires gripping the road, my body thrown forward against the seatbelt, my heart dropping instantly. In that moment, I was completely certain I had hit him. There was no doubt in my mind. It felt unavoidable. But then the car came to a stop, and there was nothing. No impact, no sound, no body. Nothing in front of us. Just empty road. I remember sitting there for a second, completely frozen, gripping the wheel so hard my hands hurt, trying to process what had just happened. My breathing was heavy. My whole body was shaking. My wife immediately asked what was wrong, because she could tell something had happened just from my reaction. When I told her I had seen a man in the road, how he had just jumped into the car's path, she looked confused, and then turned to look ahead again. She said she hadn't seen anyone at all. Not just that she didn't see the moment. It was that, according to her, the road had been completely clear the entire time. No figure, no vest, no person standing in the lane. My daughter was still asleep in the back, completely unaware anything had even happened. We slowly started driving forward again, scanning the road carefully. But there was nothing. No movement, no roadside activity. No car pulled over. No explanation. Just empty asphalt stretching ahead of us. What makes it worse is how vivid it was. I didn't think I saw someone. I saw details. The reflective vest catching the headlights. The shape of him standing there. The way he was looking at us right before he moved. It was extremely clear in that moment. And yet, according to my wife, there was never anyone there. Even now, I keep going back over it, trying to find some logical explanation. Fatigue, lighting, misperception, anything that could make it fit. But nothing really does, because in that moment I was completely certain I was about to hit a man who had just stepped into the road, and then, just as quickly, he was gone.